Welcome to Ira's Everything Bagel, where I talk with intriguing people about everything, their passions, pursuits, and points of view. Will a small coal mining town survive the rise of modern day American tycoons? Spoiler alert, it won't. And in his new novel, Ghost Town, my guest, international best-selling author in multiple categories, Dr. James R. Gregory, tells us why. And after a 40-year career building a global brand management powerhouse and authoring 5 landmark books on corporate branding, James reinvented himself as the king of the short reads, crafting sharp, compelling weekend novels. Now he turns his storytelling skills to a sweeping historical thriller, drawing on Western Pennsylvania's backwoods and echoes of tragedies like the Johnstown flood to chronicle Sulphur Creek's last man standing and the tycoon who destroys everything he loves. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes, Noble, and all the usual places. And for everything about James, go to jamesrgregory-books.com and follow him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And James, can I call you James?
Call me anything you want.
All
Jim
right.
is fine.
Jim or James, welcome to the show. Thanks. I usually ask you
Oh,
ahead of time, but welcome to the
thank you
show.
so much, Ira. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
Well, I was intrigued by your background because you've had a long career in business and now you've turned yourself into I don't know, is it a mass production guy of putting a new book every 5 minutes out into the
Well,
world? Or how did that all happen for you?
I don't know that it's every 5 minutes, and it certainly doesn't seem that way when I'm writing them. But I was a producer of books in my career, so I know how to write, know how to produce books, and know how to do the research for my academic era as well. But the books that I love to write about ideas. I love concepts. I love seeds of ideas that percolate over my lifetime and want to be told. Those stories want to be told. And so I'm writing them at the speed that they want to be told. And the fact that they are coming out once every year or so is just it just happens to be the way it's happening.
Well, it's very impressive. I know I always think about writing a book, and I'm into my 30th year of thinking about writing a book. So I'm very impressed with people that can write a book once a year, let alone once in a lifetime. So that part's great. But how do you mesh your background, which is business and branding, into the complete other side of things, which is literary aspirations? In other words, it seems to me it's two different worlds. Maybe it's not.
Well, I don't see it as two different worlds, although writing business books is different than writing fiction. In business, I had McGraw-Hill was my publisher. I had Business Week was my sponsor. It was a happy marriage. I mean, I didn't have to think about selling the books. They took care of everything, and all I had to do was show up and give speeches and sign books. And that's a pretty good gig.
Right.
And then as a result, I would get clients as a result of that as well. So it just couldn't have been a better combination. Then my wife and I worked together for 40 years, and we sold our business in 2013. And I needed something to do right away. So I wrote a book about kind of our memoir. It's called Small Fortunes, and that's made up of 3 novellas in one book. And that was pretty exciting. That did really well and was a lot of fun to write. Now that was novelish. It was I call it a memoir, and it was our story.
Sure.
But I had to change everything so that I didn't have to explain what I was doing with my clients or the people that worked for me and that sort of thing. So that went pretty well. Then COVID hit, and I worked with my brothers to develop a story about growing up. So this was our COVID project. And we wrote a story about all the things that we did to get in trouble. And, and that was called Columbia the Street. And it did very well. And it's so much fun. I would love to be a best-selling author and a New York Times bestseller, but I'm happy to get feedback from readers who say, hey, that was a great book. It meant something to me. It was meaningful. And that book, Columbia the Street, was definitely that type of book. And what it was my perspective of the street we grew up on, Columbia, from the time I could first think till I was in sixth grade. So that's the time frame. And I was the youngest in the family, so that I was also picturing my older brothers as we were growing up. And I was so focused on Columbia, the street, that I thought Columbia University and Columbia, the country, were named after our street. So, so that gives you the perspective of that book. Um,
How many brothers involved in the project? You have
or-
brothers?
Three brothers and a sister, but she had passed away. So, but there were stories about her in there as well.
Sure.
Great fun. Um, and then I started writing novels, and the first novel I wrote was called Zephyr's War, and that's focused on a Ukrainian capitalist wanting to go take his company public in on the New York Stock Exchange, and the process he went through to do that, but then the Russian mafia wanting a piece of the action. So it is a thriller. It's a thriller that crosses boundaries, and it's a pretty fun, exciting, and fast-paced book. Uh, that was followed by Killer App, which is all about artificial intelligence, and this the protagonist, his name is Bryce Bogle, and he works for a family media company. And the family's saying, "Hey, your writing isn't that great. You're not get your following is just you just don't have many people interested in your work. You really got to step it up. Why don't you look into this artificial intelligence to improve your writing?" So he does, and the app he buys is called Artificial Intelligence Made Easy, or Amy for short. And he gives her a female persona, and she speaks a lot like Siri, and has a voice that communicates with him, and everything is great. I mean, man, his work is fabulous. It's just suddenly he's spending half the time doing the work and giving everything to Amy to produce, and it is just going extremely well until she happens to get involved with his romantic side. So she begins to question his choices, and he tries to download her or get her off the computer, and he can't do it. She says, "Not so fast, Bryce," and it's a little bit like 2001: A Space
Hal,
Odyssey
exactly.
or
Hal.
Ex Machina, the movie. Fantastic movie, but it runs parallel lines to that, and it's just a fun read.
Well, there are two things you said that I picked up on that I'd like you to explore a little bit more, and then we'll talk about Ghost Town, which has an interesting premise and a thriller. But one was when you retired after 40 years, and you and your wife were in business together, so you sold the store downstairs when you guys were living upstairs. That's the typical way that works, and
Right.
metaphorically. And then you said you had to keep busy. So is that part of your nature where you always have to be doing something?
Yes, well, the first thing I did was I got my doctorate after I retired. So it was like it's keeping busy is not always necessarily good planning. Okay, so I got the doctorate and said, well, let's do this for fun. It was not fun. It was hard work, and but I was so stubborn. I forced it through and got it done. But yes, I am just full of energy, and yet I live on a golf course and I don't play golf. Uh, so that's the kind of guy I am. I've got to do everything, but I'm not necessarily good at it
I
all the
have an
time.
idea for your next novel, which is a guy who lives on a golf course that doesn't play golf, but an assassin tries to kill him by having a golf ball come through the window and hit his head. And then you have to find out why that all happened. But anyway, never mind that. The other part that I picked up from what you were talking about was after writing about Columbia, you pivoted, you made it sound very easy. You pivoted to writing novels. And yet there's got to be a reason why you decided to go down that path. That's what I'd like to get from you. In other words, you made it sound like it was just, oh yeah, now I'm going to do make it easy. I'm just going to write fiction now. But there must have been something going on at the time that made you want to pursue that world of writing.
In that particular case, Zephyr's War, there were two things that I had experienced, and I what's interesting is I didn't do this consciously. Okay, it developed subconsciously. But one thing is I was always fascinated by Chernobyl, the nuclear disaster. What happened to those people? Where did they go? What did they do? And the protagonist in our story, his family owned a sunflower farm within visual distance of Chernobyl, the power plant. So that's how, I wanted to learn more about that and I wanted to write about it. So that's where, his whole family was wiped out. I don't want to give too much away here,
Here's
but
the thing, though, James. You are talking about something you were interested in, but you converted it to fiction. That's what I'm trying to get from you is why you pivoted to fiction after your long career on the business side and writing nonfiction, memoir. You're going into fiction. That's the more general question I have for
because I know I understand certain parts of business. Okay, like one of my clients in New York was the New York Stock Exchange. So taking a company public, I knew and had insights into how to do that. And so I wrote about something I knew and the kind of problems that could come up if somebody was trying to bring them down. So I wrote about something that I knew, but in a fictional way.
But why fiction, I guess, is what I'm asking is why did you decide to write fiction on an ongoing basis as opposed to before, where your background was in the world of nonfiction and your initial writings were nonfiction? What put you
That's a,
on the fiction path?
yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah,
I
that's what I'm
think
sticking with
I
it,
think
James, until you can answer. I'm going to keep asking that same
yeah,
question.
no, it's because I could tell a story. I could create a story that was interesting and that was would be compelling. And so if I could do the same thing in a business case, and it would probably have worked quite well and may have sold some copies. But I wanted to tell us a bigger story. I wanted to tell a more intriguing story. I wanted to create tension that I'd never seen created before, and so that that's as good an answer as you're going to get
Well, I
from
finally
me.
got it from you. That's
And
good. I'm good with it.
and what's interesting is the same is true with all three of the novels that I've written. There, I have business experience with artificial intelligence. So I took that business experience, that knowledge that I had, and the fear that people have around artificial intelligence, the unknown, and I wanted to create something that was beyond the issue of just explaining it. I wanted to create tension and interest and an exciting story around it. And the same is true with Ghost Town.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Ghost Town in a moment. One other quick question. When you started to write fiction and the output that you have produced is impressive, do you run the draft of the manuscript by your wife because you two were partners all those years?
Yes and no.
Okay. Share with us what you didn't, and she'll hear it.
She, I ask her, I read it to her. I read it to her.
But
And
you're right.
that's,
Wait, you're going to read her the whole manuscript?
yes,
Wow, she's got
yes.
patience. Okay.
Yeah, yes, she does. And there is wine involved, you know.
Oh, then
So
right away she's going to say, "This is a great novel."
but she give I know that she will give me the straight scoop. She will tell me whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether I'm off completely off the rails. And some of my work is a little bit edgy, not in the world of, real heavy duty fiction writers, but in terms of what I'm used to doing, or what her experience with my whole history of being in business, it's different from what I had normally done in the past. But but she is very good about it. And I also have other readers who will give me straight feedback, which is so essential in reading, to have readers for novel writing.
Right before we talk about Ghost Town, I was thinking one other thing. Do you find your new life more stimulating than your old life or equal?
Well, it's very interesting. I love telling stories. I love writing novels. What I don't like is the business process. You would think as having a marketing firm for 40 years that that would be a piece of cake, the marketing aspects of no, of your books. It's not. It's not easy at all. It's not fun. And it's if anything would stop me from writing, it is that part of the process. And it's not just writing, but it's the grinding out of the work with the publisher, making sure it's precisely the way they want within their parameters and within their scope of what they are trying to do. And I find it to be very tedious, and tedious is not what I want in these stories. I want to write the stories. I want to go like crazy and let somebody else worry about that. Kind of the way I did with the books, business books that I wrote. But they weren't fun to write.
Well, hopefully you find conversations like this at least somewhat entertaining and not grinding as in dealing.
Absolutely. This is a highlight.
So let's talk about Ghost Town. How did you come up with the idea of Ghost? I alluded to it in the beginning, in your introduction, but you tell us how you decided to grapple with that subject and those characters.
Well, every story that I have has a seed of something that actually happened. And in this case, the seed was one winter day. My father said, "Hey, Jimmy, why don't you and I go and pick up a load of coal in his pickup truck?" And I was 10 years old, and that we did these things as an adventure, a father-son adventure, and I just loved it. I mean, I lived for that. Say we'd get a little mug of hot chocolate, a thermos, and get it between us and get in the truck and drive up into the mountains, way up into the mountains, way up into the Appalachian Mountains, where the cold from even though it wasn't an extremely cold day, the dampness and the coldness would go right through you. And it was just incredible. We pulled up into this coal mine, this little town of 4 or 5 houses, and a coal mine with a coal tipple going into the mine. And he stopped, and we got out, and there was a young boy who was exactly my age, who worked in the coal mine for his dad. His father owned the coal mine, and he would work. And he came out of the coal mine covered in coal dust from head to toe. I, I was speechless. I was speechless. I couldn't even imagine what was going on. And he's happy-go-lucky. He said, "Hey, why don't you come into the coal mine with me?" He said, "I'll show you." I looked at my dad, who was like, I was expecting him to say, "No, don't you dare go into that coal mine." He said, "Sure." So I panicked, but out of embarrassment, I went into the coal mine with this young boy. His name was Murph. And we went into the coal mine, and just far enough that it started really getting dark, and then I couldn't see. And I heard this rail car coming down the tracks, and he pushed me to the side so that I wouldn't get run over by the coal car. And it went out. That was our load of coal, and it went out to our truck and dumped right into the truck. Well, when I heard that, I started running. and I ran right out of that coal mine and freaked out. And I just couldn't believe it. Well, that I always wondered about that young boy. I always wondered what happened to him. I always wondered how could he grow up in an isolated spot like that? What was his life like? What did he do? So Sammy Murphy is the main character in Ghost Town. He's the protagonist, and he was born in the Ghost Town, which was called Sulphur Creek, and he grew up there and he died there. And so his whole life was his whole focus was on this Sulphur Creek little tiny ghost town. And the antagonist is Barry Bacon, who grew up in New York City and always envisioned himself as one of the big industrialists like Andrew Carnegie or Frick or Mellon. And he wanted to create his own empire, much like theirs. And so he thought the easiest way in to do that would be through a coal mine. Buy a coal mine, build it up, sell the coal to the steel companies, and build a business that way. And it did pretty well, except that he was arrogant. He was arrogant and wouldn't pay attention to advice that he would get from the miners who knew that he was getting in trouble. And so that give and take, I just love that in business. I love the tension that is created by people who know versus people who think they know everything. And I saw it so many times in business. And I wanted to tell a story about that.
And I think
Um,
there's themes of connection too within that novel.
oh, absolutely. And so then it evolves to the town. They moved to Johnstown, which we call Shantstown in the book, and that had a flood as well, the 1889 flood that where a dam broke, and this touches on that as well. Uh, one of the interesting things about Barry Bacon is every time he gets in trouble, he changes his name and walks away from the problem. And I've seen people do that as well. So I wanted
They're
to
called politicians, yes.
yes, exactly right.
Well, how long did it take you to write Ghost Town?
It takes about a year to write a good workable draft.
Yeah, you were mentioning
Uh,
your yearly output, but that one I thought might be longer or shorter, wasn't sure. But when you write something that's somewhat depressing in a way because of the landscape, do you find that you get emotionally involved with your characters and the action as you're writing it?
Absolutely, yes. I find that. Yes, I get involved with the characters. All of my characters are alive and part of my being, and so when I'm writing about them, I'm thinking about them, and oftentimes, great novelists say you should write an outline and then follow the outline so that you stay on track. Not me. I let my characters take take me wherever they want to go, and I try to be very much in tune with them. What would this person do? Well, this person, this character, who's arrogant or innocent, what would they do at this point? And then I write, and it either flows or it doesn't. I can back up and rewind and try something else. I once I, I once killed off a character in one of my books, and I every reader who read it said, "I will never buy your books if you kill that character off." And I said, "Hey, I'm easy. He's back to life. Hallelujah."
That's the author. You can do that kind of stuff. Well,
Yes,
some novelists or some novels have sometimes inadvertently a message. So does your novel Ghost Town, again, it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all the usual places. Does your novel have a message or more than one message that you are communicating through either the characters or their actions?
In general, I try to tell a good story, an uplifting story. So if my message is uplifting, that I've accomplished something. And it doesn't have to be um, smushy or anything. Uh, I also want to say that my good characters, the good people, the good guys are not all good, and the bad guys are not all bad. And that theme is kind of evolved by itself over time. It's through by my writing. I said, gee, I see a pattern here. And to try to tell both sides of a story. Barry Bacon was not a bad guy. He was just arrogant and never learned from his arrogance, even to the very end. And so that type of thing. The Sammy Murphy, who is the protagonist, is you think this guy is just there's no hope for him, and he turns out to be quite good. Is able to do something really great for his son. So it's just I love that give and take. I love the changing of the positionings as I write. It's just such a neat challenge.
Can your novels convert to other languages and other cultures? So if someone reads your book in Spain or France or wherever, they
Yes, all of
understand,
my
they'll
all of
understand,
my
they'll understand.
okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that they'll understand the geographic location and the sense of the characters.
Yes, I think so. All of my business books were translated into languages around the world, and I found that when I thought that they would not translate well, they perfectly did. The and I think my novels will too. I never thought about asking that specific question, but I think so. Um, you know, if you know Johnstown about the Johnstown flood, it's a very specific thing that happened to a very specific spot, and so therefore maybe they wouldn't pick up on the nuance of that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm already changing the name
Right,
and explaining the situation.
right.
So
And real quick, we have about a minute left. Your upcoming project after Ghost Town?
I have a new novel that I'm working on. It's called Undercurrent, and it's a little bit controversial.
Well, that's a great way to leave it. My guest has been Dr. James R. Gregory. He's author of Ghost Town. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes& Noble, and all the usual places. And for everything about James, go to jamesrgregory-books.com and follow him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. But James, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Ira. It's great fun.
Thank you. And join us every Thursday for a new schmear on Ira's Everything Bagel.